Hey guys, welcome to another voiceover tutorial. My name is Sakumi-chan, and for this term's voiceover tutorial, we're gonna do the male equivalent of the female torso voiceover tutorial that I did a few terms ago. And for this term, I'll probably include it as well with this voiceover tutorial just so that you guys have both the male and the female one. So for the male torso voiceover tutorial, I wanted to make it not safe for work since I did it for the female as well. And since male not safe for work, meaning I'll probably be including the genitalia portion, I think, to make it not safe for work, because you know how shirtless guy is not really considered not safe for work. But anyways, plus some of you have requested that, and I thought I'd throw that in. I'll probably also make one for a female, just you know, covering all bases. Probably do it in another tutorial. But anyways, let's get started with the male torso voiceover guy, and we're just gonna pretty much start off with what we usually start off with. Solid round brush. Make sure to go with a fairly small brush, hardness 100% to make it a solid round brush. So I'm just gonna try to sketch out a pose here for the male. So I'm gonna try to show you guys basically how I usually go about doing male pinups. I should probably do a start off with a bit more simpler format with the skeleton and everything in the neck here, the clavicle. So right now I'm just kind of sketching out pretty much the limbs in a more so simplified way. As you can see, kind of a lot of circular going on, even though I did start kind of drawing the form out. It is still slightly rougher, and remember, the belly button is usually aligned with the elbow. I have a lot of anatomy tutorials. You guys just have to look it up if you're curious. Also, you can refer to Google. I would also recommend for you guys to check out any books that are called Anatomy for Artists. That will really help you guys with that. So I'm just gonna leave this without anything for now. I'll draw it out later, because just for those of you that are not really interested in the not safe for work portion, I'll just do like the basic anatomy. So this is a pretty stacked guy, like a pretty buff guy, and this is usually kind of the type that I prefer to draw, cause guys, I do like to draw curves, and that's why I draw a lot of girls, and girls are a bit more fun in that aspect. And for guys, I feel like if when a guy has curves, they're usually a bit more like buff and has the V cut here, so it's more fun that way. That's my definition of when guys have curves. Well, at least the type that I prefer to draw. I just like to draw a lot of anatomy. So now we're gonna do a more of a frontal. So as you can see, if you compared my female tutorial versus the male one, you'll see that the poses are not as crazy, and that's because you know, it's harder to think of like, I guess, more unique poses without going too crazy. But girls naturally have this curvy body, so it's easier to pose them in more interesting ways. And guys, I mean, definitely there's ways to pose them, however it is slightly more challenging. And yeah, just trying to think up of pretty kind of basic poses. Yeah, a lot of times nowadays I find myself looking at more references for guys, because you know, I draw a lot of girls, and that really helps me improve on drawing girl pinups. But when it comes to guys, I feel like I need a bit more help when it comes to kind of capturing the anatomy better, so I end up using quite a bit of references. So as you can see, this is kind of a angled view of top view of the dude. Oh god, I'm probably not gonna try like that. Yeah. I also had requests to draw sort of like yaoi stuff, and I thought, hey, that would be fun too. I guess I could end it right here. Let me just lower it down. Let's get a couple of poses. Okay. What else? Oh, there's a classic pose that I like to do for guys. The guy pinup, male pinup anyways. Let's do it this way, this side. Even though I'm right-handed, so I prefer to do, for some reason, I like to do draw from left side, so the character's facing towards the left. But let's try to do this. So I'm just gonna start off with a basic torso. This is like a pinup pose that I like to do for guys, where they're like having their arms like all behind their head. That's like a classic male pinup pose that I like to do. And of course you have your stomach and the abs. Okay, so here there's a muscle that kind of goes like this and goes back to the back. Oh god, sorry, that sounded really confusing. There's a muscle that goes from the inner armpit towards the back, and then you have sometimes I think it's like a combination of ribs and muscles that guys have on the side, and sometimes if the guy has really not a lot of fat, you can see his rib bone just a little bit, and then of course the abs, which is like, for me at least, something I find fun to paint. It's just, I guess on girls I like to paint breasts, and on guys I like to paint abs. Just something that I enjoy because, I don't know, it's just really interesting. I want to do like a sexy sexy guy pose. And of course you have the butt. Like that. And of course, you know, this pose, I wasn't really used to drawing pose like this, but oops, sorry. Definitely went on Google and looked up some references. Just always helps to have a library of references that you can refer to. I myself have a big folder with male references, especially because I want to be better at male anatomy, because I don't really draw them that often, but when I do draw them, I really want to make sure I get it right, so that's why. But anyways, let's see, what other poses can we do? Kind of want to do interesting ones. I'm not sure if a 3 is enough. I can really do like super detailed version of the 3. I know I did like 6 different variations for the female one. However, the female one was I would say easier for me because I draw a lot of females and I'm a little bit faster, but with dudes it definitely takes me more time, and plus I wanted to make this a little not safe for work. So because of that, I'm gonna stop at 3 variations, and we're just gonna take it from here. Let me just make this a little bigger so that all of them are kind of on equal ground. So yeah, anyway. Okay, so we have our sketch. Let me name this sketch. Let's get that done. I might do a mini tutorial on female genitalia just to make it even, because I'm going to do it for male. Because I know you guys will be requesting it, so might as well do it. Alright, so let me make another folder called line art, and I'm just going to do quick line art for these sketches. Let me just duplicate this layer right now, move it into line art. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing well. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to lower the opacity. As always, if you guys watch my tutorials often, we're going to go ahead and create another layer. We can keep the same brush size, it's fine. Sometimes I like to work with very, very low opacity on the sketch, and then I can do the line art a bit more without getting distracted by the sketch. So when it comes to line art, I try to be a bit more detailed, put a bit more anatomical detail into it, just like that. And you know, sometimes with the sketch, it might be a little difficult. I mean, with the liner, it might be a little difficult because the sketch sometimes, if it's not clean enough, sometimes I need multiple passes to be able to make it look a bit more anatomically accurate. Since oh gosh, so I remember going. Since if the sketch is rough, it'll be hard to kind of determine where everything is at first glance, unless you're really used to it. So this got the belly button is here. Grab the abs. Oh, usually goes like this, and here, and then of course we have the rib cage and the other rib cage that goes like this. This is the muscle that pulls from the armpit to the back, and then we have a little bit of an indent here, and then we have the not sure what this is called in technical terms. Let's just call it rib cage muscle. But it's definitely there. And we have the belly and the cutoff for where the hair gets, and then the bottom. And of course you have the V-cut for the guys. You know, I've seen V-cuts on really fit girls as well. But it's not very common unless the girl is super fit. So there we have it. Let me just zoom in on my smaller preview here. I have a smaller preview on the side because it's always better to work with two screens. So I'm just gonna do a ambiguous bulge here, and we'll just add the detail later on in the not safe for work area. Just in case, you know, you guys don't really want to look at that. Okay, and we have a muscle indentation. So sometimes, you know, when you're really buff guys don't really that don't really have a lot of fat content, you can really see the veins in the arm. So I'm gonna just put a bit of that. You actually don't have to sketch it out that much, I just sketch it out for fun. Oh yes, and also sometimes you'll notice that you might not like the proportion that you align. You can easily change that by just selecting the area you want to change, and then hit Ctrl T for free transformation, and then you can move it. You can do a bunch of stuff, and if you click on your little tablet pen, go into warp, you can kind of freely push and pull to meet what you're looking for. Just a lot of editing, even in the line art phase. Okay, just trying to make sure that it is aligned. Also probably change that a little bit. And of course, once you're done, I feel like I probably messed up somewhere. What you could do once you think you're done is just kind of flip it over. Just see how it looks. If it looks, you know, okay. I'm just going to increase the size here, especially when the arms are down. Usually the guys, if they're really buff, chest kind of droops just a little bit, and their nips are kind of really low. It's a fun observation if you like look at a lot of those references on Google, on Google of bara guys. Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's the same as girls. When they have larger chest, the nipple kind of droops down a lot more, so it's not exactly in the center. Well, unless you're aiming to draw more of a stylized portrait of that. Anyways, let me just move this down just a little bit. Kind of tweaking the anatomy here. I want to make sure that the lines are as accurate as it can be, even though, you know, my anatomy is not perfect, but just gonna try to get it as close as possible. Okay, so now I'm gonna just close it up. I know it looks weird. It looks like the guy's been decapitated, but this is going to be so much easier once I start filling out the lines, because you know, when you start using the fill bucket, you really need to close up everything. If not, the fill bucket will not work. So I closed it up. Just make sure that everywhere is nice and closed off. There's no opening. If there's an opening, the fill bucket will not work. And also you can go ahead and clean up some of this area as well. Just the line art face, you don't really have to be super clean, as long as you make sure it's readable and fairly clean and everywhere is closed. So when you do this, you can see a clear outline and you can fill this up really easily. But anyways, that's just a demonstration. Okay, now let's flip it back to where it belongs and move it back to where it belongs. And now we will be on the second guy. So for this guy, it's a frontal view. Frontal views are something, it's quite useful to learn. However, in terms of scale of fun, I feel that it is not as fun because frontals are, you know, pretty straightforward. If you're doing a very simple pose, it's usually quite straightforward and not as creative, I guess. But nonetheless, let me try to do a frontal that does not look crooked, because I have difficulties doing frontals because I don't really do them that much, and that is pretty much the case with a lot of drawing. You know, if you don't do a lot of one thing, it's hard to get good at it. So of course there should be a fine balance in what you guys do in terms of practice. If you're not good at something, just keep doing it. If you really wanna, that's your goal to get good at it, definitely go for it. Draw a lot of that stuff. Some of you might be wondering, then why don't you do landscape? Because I'm not really good at it. I could, however, my main focus is not landscape, and what I really want to get good at is just, I want to get better at anatomy. You can always get better at something, so that's why I focus on pretty much a character main, if you can say that in an artist term, because I know it's a gaming term. But anyways, get some muscle there, some veins, and then the what's it called? The rib cage, and then of course the abs, and then the belly button. Okay, I think I might not have done this properly, but we'll have to see. So right now he's doing a little hip motion. And then you have the leg. Oh god, I really don't like sketching out hands. But I usually always do these kind of simple just like clutching hand poses, just cause just to kind of avoid doing too much. The main focus is still the body language, and of course got the bulge here, and we'll save the detail for later. And we have leg muscle, and then we close the legs off. Oh gosh, yeah, this is what a weird pose that I did. So what I'm trying to achieve is kind of like a looking from up to down, pretty much. And I don't know if this is gonna look okay. Let me just flip it over. As always, let's flip it over and check it out. Yeah, see how like lopsided this is? It's kind of funny. Okay, let me see if I can fix this somehow. So I noticed the arm is a little bit longer. I can make it smaller, and also I could put the arm behind the leg. You see how that looks? Yeah, I don't know, man. It just does not look it looks funny. Okay, let's see if we can resize this arm and kind of push it a little bit towards in front of that leg. So what it feels like is he's doing a pretty fabulous walk here. One arm up and then one arm behind that leg, where he is this leg is obviously kind of a little bit more forward. I can do kind of like this to make it feel more like he's walking. And on top of that, what we could do is like do a bit of just skewing this sketch a little bit so that a bit more balance. See how much that helps? Initially we had a really weird sketch. I mean, not a weird sketch, but a very like a lot of skewing sketch. Now just trying to change the thickness of the arms. Don't want to make it too thick. I guess this should be okay, and gonna make this a little bit bigger just so it matches the other sketch, and then I'm going to flip it over. Always flip back and forth. Also, now this arm is looking a little wonky. Want to kind of increase the size. So, you know, sketch face is not like you have to get everything perfect. I'm sure after I put the color and shading and everything else, I'll probably still edit it a little bit just to make it feel a bit more balanced. So now we're gonna go check if, yeah, see, if you don't close up all the lines up, you'll be having that issue where once you fill it up, when you select it, it's not going to have the nice silhouette around it. Okay, let me just clean this area up a little bit more. Okay, there we go. This side is really messy, but it's closed up. We just want to make sure everything's closed up. If it is a little bit messy, it should be okay. Because usually when I do this, the line art is not going to be part of my finished product, at least not too massively. It's just going to help me kind of blocking the colors, the basic color. So let's try that again. Make sure, see, now it's filled up, even though it's a little bit has some extra little fringe that we have to erase manually, but that is okay. Also, another thing, I need this to be a little bit more curvy, like that. Also, probably just going to increase the wrist size a bit, like that. Okay, so this one is also done, and of course the nibs are probably even lower because it's that angle. There we go. And one more. So this is my typical guy pinup pose that I enjoy drawing, because I don't know, I just feel like it is one of the ways when I draw male characters for them to have massive curves, because look at the curves here. Alright, let's get started, guys. So as always, line that up. Pretty much just add a bit more detail, a bit more landmarks to where everything should be. And get that muscle up in there. So this muscle connects to actually here. Actually, like that, because this muscle is supposed to be connected towards the chest area and the armpit area. Of course, we have the bicep as always, where you have the bulge, and then the what's it called? Damn, I don't think I drew this properly. Usually with elbows, when the arm is kind of flexing like this, they tend to go curved instead of popping out like this. So the armpit is being curved here in this manner, and then we have the other bicep, and then the bicep here. Okay, so now we have the chest is being stretched out, no matter how like voluptuous the guy's chest is. When it's stretched out like that, you're not gonna see a lot of it. And then continue on with the elbow and the muscle kind of crunching together type thing. I actually might need a bit of a reference. So get that there, and then the rib cage slash muscle. Okay, and the abs probably a little bit more stretched out as well. And we have the belly button, the abdominal area, the belly area, and then we have the what's it called, the V-cut here, and then oh gosh, let me make sure to see my little preview on the side so I don't get this all messed up here. Go down, and then we have the bulge here. We have the gluteus maximus, the butt area, and then the leg, and we have the muscle that goes kind of like that here. Okay, so for this, I might add a bit of a head. Probably not too much, because I want to hide the arms. I want to deal with the arms. That's how I hide it, behind the head. That's how. Ways to cheat. Ways to cheat but not really cheat. By using convenient ways to hide your problem areas. I don't know. Of course, I'm not really sure if this is 100% okay. What we have to do in this case is always have to flip it over to check it out. Okay, you see now it is quite flat. Okay, I feel like there needs to be a bit more tightness here, so I just kind of reduced it a little bit. And also I want to make this area a little bit more curved. So just going to like pull in the waist a little. Gosh, pull in the waist and then pull out the butt. Because you know, sometimes some guys have bigger butts than girls. That I know. So get that up. So now it's a bit more curvy. Okay. Gotta accentuate whatever he has going on to make it a bit more curvy. Let me just mark this here. There's also a clear muscle that goes kind of from here to the back, and sometimes it creates this bulge here, and then you have the V-cut down here. Okay. And just going to kind of edit this area with the free transformation. Something like that. Okay, now I find that I feel like the arms is a little too big, so what I'm gonna do is going to increase the size, overall size of the torso to kind of make up for that. Let's go with that. Let's see how it is. Just counting the heads. The heads, so basically, if you count one head length, from the chin of the first head, you count it down. So the first head that after the chin should arrive around at where the end of the chest is, the end of the man breast is, and then one more down it should be where the belly button is, and one more down should be where the crotch is. So here. In terms of the V-cut, I just kind of put it a little bit lower than the belly button. Let me just drag that down just a little bit more like this. So as you can see, I did a lot of editing. Now I'm gonna flip that back. So it is kind of different from the sketch now. But, oh yeah, forgot. This legs look really thick. So what I'm gonna do, so this is probably where the butt is. And then we have the muscle like here. There we go. Or we could just keep the guy just like a little bit more constrained, the pose, keep it simple. Like that. Maybe a little bit tilted. And let's kind of make that a little bigger so that it fits with the other one. So this guy is a lot thinner, well, a lot less buff. So now you can see my sketch is my liner is very messy. It's almost like a sketch. So just go ahead and line this real fast. Make sure that everywhere is closed. Alright. Clean this side up. Close that up. Very messy. I'll probably just try to make sure that everything's closed, even though it'll be messy no matter what. Just how I end up editing this sketch quite a bit. So usually when that happens, the liner is very messy like this. Alright then. Reduce the bulge just a little bit. And close this side up. The leg too. Okay. Here too. There we go. Okie dokie. So that should be okay. Let's check it out. See if it if it does select. So that's selected just fine. Alright, so now we have our line art. Just put it a bit closer. Actually, these two, let's put it down. Yeah, like that. So now I'm going to make another one, and we're gonna start coloring it. Color layer. And let's go ahead and name this step 1. Put these in that layer. Remove the sketch. Let's bring it down one more. So now let's start selecting around it so that we can fill these guys. Sounds so wrong. We can fill in the basic color. So also gotta clean some of these area up, because sometimes if the sketch is quite messy, it won't be able to kind of have that clean, nice selection. So we have to go ahead and use the lasso tool to kind of just make sure it's nice and clean. And over here too, just kind of select around the character around here too, on the leg, and here too. Okay, so that should be good. Alright, so now we have selected all of it. I'm just gonna go inverse, as always, inverse. Select the fill bucket, select a basic color that any color, it could be any color. Usually I use a gray because it's kind of pretty standard usually for a lot of artists, so I just use it. So now we have our line art and our color base color. So what we're gonna do, I guess for me, I have to first of all name this, otherwise it'll be a little confusing for you guys. So I'm just gonna constrain the line art down to the color. So what you would do is just hold Alt and then click the between the line art and the color layer, and that is restrained. Lock that down, and voila, you have it. We have it done. So now we have our base color. Let me go ahead and give everybody a base color. So I'm thinking, let's go with this color for this guy, pretty medium color, and we'll go like a little bit rosier, paler color for this guy. Actually no, I want this guy to be pale. This guy, I want him to be a bit more darker. So let's select the color, let's give him a bit of a richer tan color. Like that. Alright, so now what we do is move on to step 2, which we're gonna start adding basic color to everything. I mean basic shading to everything. Lowering the line art is usually what I do. Put them on multiply and then start. So for this, just start doing a fairly basic shadow, probably not with that color. I would like the color to be a little bit more warmer, the shadow color to be a bit warmer. So just going basically on a pretty basic shading without thinking too much about the overall shadow and where the lighting is coming from, just to kind of give dimension to the piece. And usually I think this is a good process, just going for, if you're just starting out, usually I don't do this, I just like go straight for the intense shadow and stuff. However, if you're new, I recommend starting off with a fairly basic shadow process that isn't, you're not really thinking of where the highlight is coming from, etc. You're just kind of trying to shade out the form and everything. And of course you have the arm in the back. And then probably gonna have a cast from the head that is not there. However, we can imagine that it's there. side. Just gonna give a bit more dimension to the chest, probably casting a bit of shadow underneath. Usually when the guy is busty like this, you have a bit of a cast shadow. And then kind of slowly working it up, using a very light hand to kind of accentuate the muscle over here. And just a very, very light hand. See how it's really, really light? I'm just kind of creating a very subtle form, starting to do a very subtle form here. Like that. You could also use quite a bit of other tools to do this, such as the airbrush or the smudge tool. But sometimes, you know, all you have to do is use a light hand to add just a little bit more shadow to it. Still with the same color. All it takes is kind of switching up between light-handed strokes, brush strokes, and more strong-handed brush strokes, which gives 100% opacity. So now let's go for this guy. Let's go for a darker color for the shadow, and then we can pretty much do what we did for this dude here. Kind of outlining first with a fairly hard hand to give almost 100 opacity, and then we go and do the rest of the body like that. Right now I'm just kind of contouring the character's body. And then what we're gonna do after is pretty much use a lighter hand to shade it a bit more subtly for the rest of the character. Probably this arm is probably hidden behind this leg, and this arm is in front of this leg. Alright, so now for the neck, again let's go for a shadow, casting shadow here of the imaginary head. Okay, now for the chest, have it like that. So now what I'm gonna do is use a bigger brush but a much lighter hand to kind of softly add secondary coat of shadow. So this one, just go very light with your brush. That way you can kind of be a bit more subtle, and you can kind of tell the degree of shadow that, the degrees of the shadow, the hard press and the soft press. Just very lightly with your tablet pen, put the shadow. This leg probably also being a shadow because it's kind of like going in the back while this leg is coming into the front. Let me add a little bit of a highlight here, kind of squeezing the highlight between two shadow shaded area. Same with this. So there we have it. That should be okay for now. And then for this guy, select the basic color, picking the shadow based on that, just dragging it a little bit down for a warmer shadow, and then using that, might need to make this a little bigger. So as always, using a stronger hand to do this. Kind of just shading or contouring the character. First of all, to kind of give him a basic form, and then what we could do after is apply a bit more subtly. So for this guy, I'm thinking of doing a different shadow later on, and you guys will see once we get there, get that butt high shadow in. And of course, this leg right here, just get that shadow in as well. And here too. Pretty much contouring the arm to give it a bit more three-dimensional take, and then just a little bit on the face. Now we're gonna go ahead, use a slightly bigger brush, and just gonna do very subtle shadow. So here definitely need to add that in, and also behind, actually not behind, actually over here. And if you kind of go online and search this kind of pose, it's quite interesting. When the guy stretches out his abdomen, this area is lit up. It has no shadow. You would think there would be shadow, but there isn't. It's quite interesting. Before I used to do here, I used to add shadow here, but without actually knowing that usually when you flex, this muscle kind of pops out just a little bit to kind of create the look of no shadow. Anyways, that's just my observation. Probably add. Actually, there shouldn't be any shadow here either, because when you stretch out, your chest is pretty much quite flat. Then we have the muscle, the abs, and then the underneath area, and here too. Probably a bit more shadow underneath here and here, especially when the head is overlapping the arm here too. Just kind of watching out for those areas. And we have the tendon on the neck here. Okay, so that should be good to go. So this is our first layer of shadow. So now let's move on to step 2. Three. Right, step 3. Step 3. Oh, oops. I might also kind of play around with the color of these. Just to make it... Actually, I'll play with them individually. Play around with it. So I'm going to select the first one, and I'm going to kind of auto contrast it just a little bit. Okay, that's done. Let's zoom in so we can start working on this one. So I'm gonna reduce the line art even more. That is the goal, to kind of reduce it as much as we can in the end to not have to use it. So now I'm going to just keep on layering the shadow with a even darker color in areas where I think more shadow is needed, such as intersecting elements such as the chest, kind of casting shadow on top of the abdomen, and the contour of this side, probably a little bit over here. And while you do this, oh yeah, and underneath the bulge here probably a lot. While you do this, you can also use the smudge tool to kind of help you blend things along, like this. Kind of just blend these together. That way you can kind of blend while you add details, while you add more shadow and highlights. Right now we're just kind of layering on shadow. Let's just do that. So as you do this, you'll notice that your character is getting really soft. So we have to kind of bring back some of the sharpness by using the solid round brush at the same time. Just gonna add a little bit of that chest detail here. I want him to be really juicy. So it's gonna be quite elements popping out and stuff. So we're gonna get the abs, get each their own shadow here too, and then here too. So this part is where the hip muscle is, and it is separate from the abs. So you can see there's a separation here. Just blend that down. Make sure the V-cut is slightly visible. Kind of just blending that out, and then popping a bit of highlight over here just to kind of really accentuate the V-cut here. And then down to the leg. Go over here too. Just kind of blend that in. And then here a little bit. Here too. We might need to redo this area like that. And then what's it called? The arm muscle here. These muscles are a little bit more tricky if you're just starting out doing like anatomy and stuff. That's why I would recommend, if you're just starting out, definitely practice these muscle placement and where they should be through sketches and through observing from either real life photo or using an anatomy book as reference for you guys. Always use a reference, it really helps. So just kind of shading the muscle there as much as I can, pretty much. Okay, we're gonna make this in shadow like that. Actually, another thing we could do to help this along is just use the lasso tool to select some of these areas where kind of want to overlap it with a big amount of shadow like this. And of course, once you have that, you have to kind of blend that in, otherwise it's gonna not look too blended in. Depends on what type of style that you're going for. Of course, sometimes you want to have that rougher look. It really depends on your personal taste and style. Okay, so now we have that done. Put that arm fairly in the dark to help kind of bring forward the chest and everything. Okay, so now let's move on to here. Just kind of shading it. There we go. So now this is a bit more blended. It's definitely a bit more blended. Okie dokie. Let's blend this area out just a bit before we move on to the next example and blend this out. We really want to make sure this is nice and distinguishable. So I'm gonna try to make this fairly a bit more cleaner because it was a little bit messy. Just going to take a bit of that transitional color and just kind of blend it with the darker color transitioning into a lighter color like that. Okay, that should be okay. So now let's move on to this example, and we're gonna go with a even darker shadow, just kind of to layer on the shadow. And of course, like the previous step, we're going to just kind of start blending it using the smudge tool, as always, our trusty smudge tool. A very, very handy in terms of blending. You can blend very, very fast. However, be careful where you blend. You don't want to overly blend too much. Always leave one side that is a sharp to maintain the balance of sharp versus soft. Yes. Okay, so now let's go back to kind of adding that bit more darker shadow. It's always a balance between blending and then going back to add more details. You always want to make sure that it's not too crazy. So now I'm kind of adding shadow to the abs, kind of making it feel like this part is in shadow, slowly going down in shadow. I really want to make sure it feels like you're viewing the character from above, so we really need to kind of sell the fact that the shadow is casting cast it on the bottom where the lighting is coming from the top. So right now all the dark shadows being put towards the bottom of the character. So this part probably gonna be in shadow too. Here too. Okay, and then of course the leg as well. This leg will probably be a bit more darker than this leg, just because this leg is kind of like a bit it's kind of coming towards us a bit more, so this one is kind of receding into the distance a bit more, so it's a bit more darker. And of course we have the arm. This arm should be fairly not too much in shadow, however this arm should be more in shadow because it is a little bit more receded into the distance. As you can see here, this arm goes behind this leg that is coming towards us. So a lot of this is right now what I'm doing is kind of making sure the elements that is further away from us is a bit more in shadow, and the elements that is closer to us is a bit more in highlight, and that way you can make it look a bit more dynamic in a way, instead of everything is just one flat tone. Okay, so let's zoom out, check it out. Let's check it out. Okay, so we can clearly distinguish if you zoom out. A good trick to kind of check this type of stuff out is just kind of to zoom out. If you zoom out and you can still understand what the artist is getting at or what you're getting at, then it's working. So we should be good for that. And then I'm just going to kind of blend this in using the smudge tool. Okay, and again, kind of paying attention to how much I blur, because I don't want to blur everything. We gotta make sure that there's a fine balance of overly blur to not enough blur, just kind of in between. Okay, so there we have it, nice and blended. Okay, and after that I'm going to just select this real fast and kind of edit it a bit, maybe somewhat like that, and maybe we can change the tone of it to a bit just like these maybe. Okay, there we go. And then lastly we have this guy right here sporting his look. So for this one I'm gonna start off by adding just a bit more shadow over here, and in this area in general, because so for this guy, instead of having the lighting coming from above, we're gonna have the lighting come from the right of the character. So because of that, I have to kind of switch the shading up just a little bit. So oops, have most of the highlight coming from the left, pretty much. The same for the neck area, and for this area too, although not too much here, just maybe just a bit. And of course, gotta make sure everything is, well, actually making sure the highlight is coming from the left. So I'm kind of contouring everything, putting the highlight on the left, the shadow on the right. Have to make sure that is what we're going to do. There we go. And now see how much that changed. It definitely changed quite a bit. And then after that, we can either add more shadow, or I can go ahead and do a very, very fast blend with the smudge tool. Just kind of blend this fairly well, not too much, because we still want to have a bit of that sharpness. Okay, zoom in on there, sharpen up the areas such as this area. We really want to make sure the belly button is shaded well. There we go. And this area too. And I'm gonna go ahead and use a even darker color just to kind of build up that shadow. Always build up that shadow. And of course, you need to put the shadow on this leg right here, especially just so we can get the impression of this leg overlapping this leg, casting a shadow on this leg. It's always think about what's casting shadow on top of what element, and in a way it'll really help you with improving, as well as it's kind of mentally challenging. I know it's a weird thing to say, but I always have to think as an artist where the shadow should go. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have a freedom in the type of shadow you put. Like sometimes I'll have some shading that makes no sense in real life. However, if you take into account the composition, sometimes you can kind of cheat that. Reality versus creativity and appeal is another subject. Sometimes I would forego the reality for a bit more composition, and it's always funny because I get comments like, wait, her hair is not supposed to blow that way, or the shadow doesn't make sense. I mean, I can make it look okay, however, if you really think about it, the shadow might not necessarily make sense. And sometimes, you know, you can definitely take that route, like having a reality defining shadow that doesn't make sense. But you know, as long as you put the proper shading in certain parts to make sure it makes sense somewhat, despite it not being realizable. But despite it not being realistic, as long as it looked good, you know, it's all about that. You gotta choose between reality or appearance. Sometimes reality is boring, so I tend to kind of spice it up a bit, or something like that. Okay, so I'm putting a bit of highlight over here, just to give a bit more variety. Probably going to extend the abs just a bit, extending. Usually there is a must. The abs have a bit of a dragging appearance, just a little bit on the side, and then now of course we have the bottom ab area, and then the crotch area. Oh gosh, okay, so this should be okay. Let me just blur this out. So that definitely helps with making it a bit more 3D. If you zoom out, you can gradually see it going down and a bit more defined and a bit more shaded as we go down. So that's a good level. Now we're gonna go ahead and do step 4. Oops, not 34, step 4. Let me just create more canvas room. Bring that down. Add more space. Alright guys, so let's start putting in a bit more detail. So this is gonna be our second pass of just kind of rendering each of these. Okay, let's start with the first one, and we're going to start incorporating a bit more lasso tool action. So let's take that down a bit, focus that a lot more, and also in addition to that, what we could do is also use the lasso tool to kind of add more shadow to this as well. So let's just get started with that. Go here. So right now I am adding a more defined shadow. So meaning now I'm starting to add larger shadow like this, and a bit here, just on areas where I think it would apply. So right now what I'm thinking is the shadow is coming from the bottom right. So as you can see, most of the shadow is kind of selected on the right areas where I think that would apply, and I probably need to fix that as well. Probably gonna do a bit of this. So this is where the shadow is coming from, maybe a little bit here. So after we selected that, let me just select a little bit here too. What we're gonna do is going to brightness contrast and just kind of turn that down a little. Maybe adjust the contrast depending on what type you're aiming for. I think this is good. Once you're happy, you deselect. So now you can see we have a basic layer of shadow. So now what we could do is start kind of rendering it a little bit more here. So when it comes time to kind of second level of rendering, it gets a little bit tougher, I find, especially for those of you that are starting out, because this is where I start doing more of a freestyle kind of shading, where I don't necessarily target one area such as shadow or highlight. I target all areas where I just go ahead and start shading where I think is needed, or I start highlighting where it's needed. So it's a bit more chaotic in a way, so it's less technical, less systematic. So now you have to judge for yourself where in the character is missing shadow or highlight. So right now I'm kind of shading this arm right here, making sure that not one part is too bright or too dark. And of course we have the shadow over here. I'm just going to put that there. Make sure that everything is nice and blended yet retain form. So right now the shadow here is warm and here is a bit dark, so I'm just gonna go in here and make the shadow just a little bit brighter like that. And then after, we can use the smudge tool to kind of blur that. So yeah, just a lot of this process all at once now. Before it was a step by step, now it's a bit of depending on what you feel is needed, you go ahead and shade or blend or highlight, or even just kind of neutralizing some of this bright area because it's there. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and start working on the abs, trying to make them a bit less bright, a bit more just a bit more grounded, like that. So just I'm gonna keep blending on here, probably reduce the color for this. And also what we could do is select a secondary color, maybe a bit of a rosier color, or a usually I tend to lean more towards like more rosier color, just because skin tones usually I aim towards the medium light range skin tones, and usually rosier color works well with kind of adding different tones into the skin, which you absolutely need to have a variation of skin tones, of warm skin tones. So a bit of if the skin tone is predominantly orange, you add maybe a bit of pink in there just to kind of break the orangeness up. Or add a bit of blue depending on the environment. If the environment is kind of like what we have here, white environment tend to cast blue light usually. Or you have, okay, so now we have that going. You'll notice that from this to this, the pinkness kind of helps to kind of make it a bit more, I don't know, in a way more realistic because of the difference in tone in a way. So all we have to do is keep blending, just keep blending. And maybe put a bit of the pink here and here too. I need to blend that separately. And of course you can add a bit of that ab detail over here. Maybe a bit of some of that extra detail in here too. There's a bit of a curve here. And here too, where the V-cut is. Gotta make sure it's nice and visible. So just going to kind of carve it out with a shadow and highlight, and making sure that it's not super bright in one area. Usually when you end up using the smudge tool, you'll end up over softening certain areas and thus giving it a very glowy look. Now that might not be what you want, especially with male character. With female characters you can sort of get away with it because female tends to have a bit more of a soft feel. With guys, I tend to lean more towards a bit of a rougher look, so sometimes I would end up over like adding a bit of neutral color on top of the brightness, just to kind of make it not look as soft or shiny, even though it's looking soft here. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over here just to add that shadow in. Might not finish the, oh god, that arm is kind of blending into the fat. Let me just do a quick arm thing. So when it comes to painting hands, I usually like to start off with a very big brush, and then slowly switch to smaller brushes to add the details. I like to do that especially when I'm painting. If I'm not using line art, I think that's a good way to kind of build up in a way. So now we have our V-cut here. Going to now work on the arm here. Add a bit of a highlight in here, just a little bit. Don't want it to be too much. And here too. There we go. I'm just going to slowly blur that. There we go, and then I'm gonna quickly put where the nips are. Usually I just, with guys, it's a bit more less detail. Just gonna do one dark color and then one light color in the center. And if you take a look at pictures of guy chest, that's how they actually usually look. Girls require a bit more detail, but guys, like usually you can get away with a bit more of a simplistic depiction of that. So okay, now let's switch up to the neck area. Just gonna shade it in the areas where I know indentation happens, such as the clavicle. Get some of that highlight in. I'll probably blur that as well in a bit. There we go. Add some shadow here and underneath the other clavicle here. Add just a little bit of highlight here just to give the impression that it's kind of popping out just a bit. There we go, and then we can go ahead and use the smudge tool to give it a nice little blur like that. So now if we zoom out, already it's starting to feel a bit more realistic, just because we added that secondary tone. See, this is what I'm talking about. So really soft here. We can kind of make it a little better by adding a bit of a neutral color in here, just to preventing it from getting too glossy. And of course, let me just paint in some of that anatomical muscle detail. So you can see this muscle is twisting around the arm in this way. Sometimes it's a bit too pronounced, so I tend to kind of lower that pronouncedness. Sometimes I don't want to get it too pronounced because I'm not really sure if that's how it's supposed to be, so I like to go a bit light-handed on that, or make it a bit more subtle. It's just like this. Okay, so now that we have that, we just blur some of these areas up. The bulge definitely needs a bit more shading. I'm gonna make Canasi for work a bit later once we have all of these nice and done, and then we're gonna do a little tutorial for the female private part because I'm sure you guys will be asking. So okay, now for the belly button, a bit darker, and shade that up. There we go. Nice and blended. With abs, I find that I could probably get away with a bit softer look for it, just because it's a very small part of the torso, and I feel like small details you can kind of refine it a bit more, but larger areas you really can't overly soften, otherwise it's gonna look too airbrushed. So let's just go ahead and do that. It looks soft, which is good. However, we're still having the details surrounding it, so we can still get away with it. Just go ahead and put a V cut here, and then just kind of blend over here a bit more. Really kind of surround this area. It's making it its own little area, and then using a darker color right here. There we go. Okay, so now, actually, let me just do a little bit more here. So right now I'm just adding shadow here. Just gonna break that up right now. Cut it nice and clean in between here. The line art is kind of going a bit forward, but I'm just gonna make it just a little bit more towards the right. And then after we're done, we can blur that out, making sure that we don't blur the other side, so that we can maintain a bit of sharpness, and then a little bit of shadow underneath here, just a bit. So now let's zoom out, check it out. Yeah, it's starting to get there. Of course, you can use the lasso tool a bit just to make sure that some of these areas are properly shaded, like nice and sharp here too, or even a bit less shaded, kind of a bit more blended using the lasso tool, and a bit darker in here. especially towards the areas where it's a bit more like tucked together, as in each part is really close together. And they're kind of casting shadow on each other. And of course here, where the torso is casting a shadow on the arm, we really need to make sure that this is demonstrated, but not too crazy. So I'm just gonna shade a small portion of the arm there. Don't want to go too crazy. And also here, like that. Okay, so now if we zoom out, definitely starting to get there. So yeah, that's a lot of back and forth. Of course it's not done, probably need a bit of shadow here. Have a bit of a belly and then go straight down. Now I'm using the airbrush just to get the basic shading in. Like that. Okay, maybe that's a bit too forced. Okay. Something like that. Okay, so now we're probably gonna leave that to this level for now. Actually, I can't help but want to kind of blend everything out. But I think that should be good for that level. So now we're gonna move on to the frontal view of this guy right here. So same as the other guy, what our goal is just to kind of keep blending. So for this guy, I'm thinking maybe a secondary color that is a bit more, less red would help kind of make this a bit more realistic. Realism is all about multi-toned. So if, you know, let's say your character has blue skin, in order to make it feel a bit more realistic, you can't only have a blue tint. You have to add maybe another secondary cool color such as green or a little bit of pinkiness like purple into the blue skin to make it feel a bit more diverse. More diverse tone means more realism. And now that doesn't necessarily mean you should add like 5 tones. I think a good number would be 2 to 3 tone variations, just to help with that. So as you can see, in this one I'm purely using the airbrush tool, and so everything is very soft looking. After that, have to really balance it out with a hard brush. If you don't balance it out, it will look way too soft, and that's not what we want. We want to have a combination. Now I'm gonna go on the arm area to add more definition. That, and this arm is kind of going forward, so this arm will fairly be in highlight, while the rest of the character will be in shadow. So this arm will probably be in shadow. Let's make it just a little darker in some of these areas, like that. And of course, we have to shadow cast it on the neck, on the torso from the head, the imaginary head. Let's just slowly kind of add some of these neck region details that should be included, just so that it feels a bit more muscular. And of course, keeping most of the highlighted area towards the upper region, to make it feel a bit more as if we're looking down on the character. Then just keep going at it. Keep adding shadow, and then kind of blend it together with the smudge tool, or if you want to use the solid round brush, it really doesn't matter. It's just a preference thing if you prefer the feel or the looks that you get from smudge tool or the solid round brush. As always, I am blending using a fairly light hand. That's pretty much the trick when it comes to painting and blending with the solid round brush. That's done. With that, I like to blend using the solid round brush and the smudge tool just to get a combination of like ultra blend versus with a bit of like rougher blend. That way it gives me a more balanced look. Okay, so now let's work on the abs just a bit. Get the belly button going. Let me just bring that in. Put the nice V cut here. Blend that in using the solid round brush. Here too. And also make sure that this is defined in some way. And then for the leg, just kind of blend that in a bit. Maybe add a bit of highlight here just to define the muscle, the way it's going, the way it's wrapped around the leg. And of course, kind of go in here with a secondary color, just kind of breaking down secondary warm tone, just kind of breaking down the one-toneness or single monotoneness. And of course we do the same for this leg, except just gonna keep it fairly dark. And let's go ahead and start blending some of these areas. And obviously on the crotch too, the crotch is kind of weirdly lit up, so we have to make sure it's shaded accordingly. Here we go. And for sure this arm needs to be a bit more shaded as well. Just kind of going with a really dark color and then slowly blending it in like these. And let me just blend that out, and still getting like this sharp, more or less sharp area, just to kind of give the impression of extreme shadow, a bit more strong, pretty much. And of course, once we're done, just blend that in. Use the smudge tool to help you blend that in. Let me just stretch out the abs just a bit here, extend it just a little, which helps with making it feel a bit more organic. And kind of give a bit more room here. There we go. And of course, blur this area. There we go. And it's pretty much a constant thing. Sometimes the abs doesn't really feel right to me, so I end up rendering a bit more. Sometimes I can over render. It just really depends, and that's why I usually tend to have a lot of go bags. Like my history, I have around 600 steps saved up, so I can revert back to 600 brushstrokes or steps or edits that I take, and that's why I think just to be safe I have that. Okay, so now just kind of connecting that in with the sides. Maybe a little bit more definition on the sides too. Like this. There we go. Just kind of blend that in. Now it's just all a matter of blending. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead using the lasso tool and just select the crotch area for this side. And I'm gonna use the dark shadow that I have going on up on the torso down here, just to make it feel like the leg is receding, receding away from us. And of course I have to make sure the arm is properly shaded. That way it gives the impression that the arm is a little bit ahead. There we go. And just give a bit more shadow there just to shade the arm. But I guess I don't have to go that crazy. And also I'm gonna go ahead and render the arm out just a little bit better as well. Highlight the inside just a bit to give the impression of that dip that you have in your inner arm there. And just kind of shade it up a bit more. Okay, it might be a bit too much, so let's make it a little darker. And then of course blur that, smudge that in. Now for this side, same thing, just select this side with the same shadow color. However, this one we're gonna keep it fairly light because I want to make sure it feels like this side is kind of lifting. The guy's like lifting this leg a bit more, so I want to keep it fairly lighter than the other side. There we go. And a bit more shadow here, just to fill that crease up. Sorry, that dip up. And then of course more shadow here. There we go. Alright, so I think it's we're getting somewhere. And of course, gonna select the collarbone area because I want to get in that dip with a darker color. Just a little bit of a darker color, which will help. And kind of just blur that out. Blur it out a bit more. And I'm gonna use the lasso color so I can shade cleaner. Okay, so just going to kind of shade this with the airbrush a bit. Maybe a little dip here, a little dip here, especially to accentuate the tendon of the neck here. And just make sure it's nice and noticeable. I used the airbrush just to kind of carve out where there should be, and then I'm gonna use a combination of airbrush and solid round brush to kind of carve out the rest. A bit more shadow here too, and then blur that. And of course use the solid round brush to carve out where the shadow should be. There we go. Kind of add my shoulder over here and blur that in. There we go. Oh gosh, I noticed that here is missing a bit of attention, so let's go ahead and do the chest area. we're going to kind of shade both pec as a separate thing and just leave a thin amount of highlight in the middle like this. Okay, it might not look so good right now. We need to blend. Use a solid round brush to kind of just blend that in. And of course sometimes it's a little too light in the center. No worries, just erase that. So I'm trying to find a good balance. Let me just close this up a bit more. It's a bit too bright. There we go. Gotta make sure that it's not too crazy. Now for the, oh god, the nipple. You can hardly tell that it's there. Okay, just the impression of it should be okay. And maybe just a little bit of a dark shadow here, you know, where the bicep, or the, I'm not sure what the technical term, the bulging muscle here, cause a bit of a shadow there, right here. And of course a bit of shadow here casted from the upper bulging muscle. And so on and so forth. Let me just blend that as I go along. Now this can be tricky, but no worries. One simple solution is to Google buff man, and you will see there's so much reference out there. It's very helpful. I usually have a reference of male muscle because I just want to make sure that I'm getting it right. With girls, it's a bit more straightforward, I suppose. But still, sometimes I still use reference for female characters as well, just to get that, just to get the nice curve or feel of accurate anatomy, a bit more at least. I know that my anatomy is not like perfectly realistic. I aim more towards semi-realism. Okay, so now we have him. And if you take a look compared to the upper version, it's definitely a little bit more realistic, a bit more rendered. And that is mostly due to the fact that I have more than one tone. So as you can see, I have a bit of like this greenish hue inside a predominantly orange skin tone, or a brownish skin tone. And sometimes that really helps. Okay, let me just finish shading this a bit more, blur that in. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, save that just in case. Alright guys, let's move on to the last guy. And for the last guy, I actually got a reference to show you guys that so I got this photo here, and I'm mainly looking at kind of how how to shade this area in particular, and maybe this area, even though it might not necessarily apply, but just so you guys know, always use a reference if you're not sure, and sometimes using reference will help your piece look even better. So anyways, let's get started. Okie dokie. Same as the other two, I'm just gonna start off with using the smudge tool just to kind of blur things out, kind of get a nice general smooth base to work from. I was trying to find the right words. Okie dokie. So we got that done. Blur a bit on that area and here. So now that that's done, you can see that it's more or less blurred out. So now I'm gonna go ahead and use the lasso tool and just kind of use it to indicate the second layer of shadow that I want. And we're gonna heavily focus on the left side since our lighting's coming from the right. So let's just get that started right away. probably put a bit here and a little bit on that too. And let me just pretty much shade this entire area. So as you can see, I've selected quite a bit of area. I might not necessarily stick to it in the end, however, this is a good range for me because I can always remove shadow. Maybe add a bit here too. Okay, so now what we are gonna do is just go to brightness and contrast and turn down the shadow. So as you can see already, it's definitely already starting to look a lot more 3D just because of the shadow. Let me deselect. As you can see, you could probably tell if it's close up, but farther away it's looking better. Okay, and of course, oops, go down here. I'm also going to just select this random area here and make it darker. This usually helps me kind of make the shadow or the highlight a bit more interesting, but maybe, you know, you can't see the area that's casting the shadow, but you know, putting it there allows you to find it a little bit more interesting, out of the ordinary, and sometimes that's usually a lot of the times I like to do that just to add that extra interest. Okay, so now that we have that done, we can go ahead and start blending this out. You can also kind of put a bit of that warm tone in the shadow like this. Like I guess you could call this a rim light. Technically, well, not technically, sorry, wrong word. But I think this is more like a shadow light, where you just kind of, if the shadow is a bit too harsh, you put a bit of a bright color just to break it up. So now if we zoom out, you can see a bit of that nice translucency going on, and that's what we're trying to get. So okay, now I'm gonna work a bit on the armpit here, just a bit, and trying to work on the chest here, making sure this area is still flat without too much shadow, and just going to start blending these together. Here too, need to probably blend this out a bit more too. Here as well, just gonna blend that and blur that. Notice how when I blur things, I am only aiming towards the upper area, like upper section. I'm not really blending, going over the whole thing really. I'm trying to make sure to leave a sharp edge. That way it won't look overly soft. And that's what we really want to achieve when we blend. Making sure that not one area is too soft. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of sharpen, carve out that V cut on the side. So forth. Okie dokie. So based on the reference, this is more horizontal, like this. So that's one thing that is good about reference. And also there's indentation sort of like this here, looking at the reference. Maybe a bit more definition here. And just gonna change that up. I might have to look up reference of guys actually doing this pose just to make sure that I'm doing it right. I'm not really sure how this area is supposed to look. I have a rough idea, however, just want to make sure. But we'll come back to that later. For now, let's do the butt. Yeah, sorry, the butt. I'm having a harder time to talk. Goddamn, what's grammar? So now, shading the butt towards the bottom and a bit over here. And after you're done with determining the shadow, just kind of blur it out. Seems a little bit too sharp, so let me just like kind of make it not as sharp. Okay, so now working on the leg using a fairly big brush and the airbrush now. I want to make sure that it's not I want to make sure it's soft looking, well blended, but at the same time, after I'm done that, I have to go back to kind of balance that softness out with sharpness. Okay, so just blend that in. Okay, so now I have to work on the abs. Similar deal, just kind of blend that in as much as you can. It might be a little tricky with the secondary color for the shadow. Kind of like that, and then for the stomach, go down and put a bit of that warm tone on the bottom here. There we go. Okay, so now use a darker color just to separate this area here, the crotch area. Like that. Okay, we might need to do a bit more later as well. So I'm kind of going against the line a little here just because I feel maybe this would make a bit more sense. Add some darker color here, making sure this area is still lighter, and trying to sharpen this area up here. So I'm going to use this color and kind of really sharpen this area like that. Keep it nice and sharp and defined. There we go. And also down here, just gonna keep it darker towards the other leg and a little brighter here with the reddish shadow to kind of break down the super dark shadow here. There we go. Maybe a little bit of shadow here. Actually, no. Sometimes you just have to experiment, see if it works out. Okay, and gonna blur that out now that we have done that. Blur this area out too, and perhaps using the lasso tool to kind of make sure that it's nice and sharp, this area. Like that. Nice and sharp. And also I want to make sure that the belly button is quite obvious with the lighting coming from the right and the shadow coming from the left. Okay, and then I'm gonna have a little bit of shadow here just to go with, just to form our V cut on the side here. Okie dokie. And of course, making sure the highlight is coming from this area. Perhaps there is room for a little bit of shadow here, but not too much. Of course, blur that out and blur this out as well. And of course, with our muscle area here, again keeping the lighting coming from the right and the shadow on the left, and same thing with the bicep. At least I know that this is the bicep. The bicep muscle, and down here too. I'm not sure which muscle that is. It's the muscle underneath the arm. And of course, keeping it sharp right here, defining the what's it called? Damn it! The elbow. Yes, the elbow. Keeping the elbow in shadow. Well, this side of the elbow in shadow. Okay. Now I'm going to blur that, and I feel like the individual muscle, you can definitely make it soft looking. Just make sure that more or less the definition is there, just so that we can distinguish, of course. Just kind of shade that. There we go. Get that lighting up and running, and I need more shadow over here. Just gonna squeezing some really intense shadow, especially near the area where the arms are squished together. This is the perfect opportunity to do so. And maybe a little bit of a highlight here. Shadow here. Okay, there we go. And especially with pale skin, you usually tend to see a little bit of pink or orange depending on you know, how you blush. Some people have more of an orange undertone, and some people have more of a pinkish undertone, depending on which one you pick. There we go. Just kind of making sure there's a bit of a highlight coming from the right, and then adding more of that nice warm tone to break up the shadow. Okay, so now I'm going to use the lasso tool to select underneath the head, going to multiply, and kind of just add my shadow here just to separate it. Same with this, separate it, and the arm here. And of course we have to separate, oh gosh, oops, separate the collarbone like that. Not in the whole curve, just in the area where it curves the most, pretty much down here. And of course just blur that out, and another time underneath the neck. And of course making sure that it's not on the whole jawline, just a little bit on the back and in the front. Sometimes if you add too much shadow, it'll end up looking not as good, too harsh, so to say. So we have to be subtle when it comes to shadowing in real life anyways. That's what I've learned. Realistic shading can be very subtle and at the same time very prominent, depending on which area. Okay, so now we have a fairly good amount of shadow done, and you can tell this one compared to this is much more blended. Okay, I feel like this guy would probably have the most easiest time to see where his nipple is, because light skin is easier to make sure it stands out. Of course, get a white dot in there, and yep. Okie dokie. So now we have all three sort of, you know, at a good point. Let me just blur the face real fast. So all three character is fairly, you know, rendered out to the best of my abilities. I'm just going to auto contrast. Sometimes auto contrast have some good looks. If something is too crazy, we can just like fade it a bit. But otherwise, yeah, it's getting there definitely. So that's our step 4. It's a bit more rendered. Oh, I forgot about this one. This one, what we could do is just add a little bit of shadow here, as if the head is casting a shadow over there. Oops, not again. We're going to go to darken, which just makes the area that I selected a little darker. Like that. There we go. A very general shadow to help kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And of course the armpit needs to be a bit more darker. Okay, go back to normal. Gotta make sure the armpit is very defined, because it's one of the landmarks. Okay, so now that that's done, let me just add a bit of a warm tone here. Maybe a little bit of shadow here. And here. And then of course leave the rest of the area fairly bright. Like that. Okie dokie, I think we should be good. I kind of want to add the same secondary coloring here too. Let me try to do that. So I'm just gonna go ahead, take the same color I used on this guy and put a bit of it in the really dark shaded area here on this guy right here, and see if that helps break it down. It doesn't really help too much. Maybe a little here, just to break up the super darkness of the shadow. Okay, so yeah, it didn't really help as much as it did for the pale skin guy. But anyways, I think we're good to move on. Okay, let's make another step. Oh god, this canvas is turning out to be super long. Okay, let me just extend the canvas a bit more. Okay, now let's move on to step 5. Step 5, move them down. So step 5 is when I suppose when I merge everything down into everything, so that the line art is now kind of part of the painting, and if I want to change something, I'll change it without having to worry too much. Let me just move this guy down a bit so that it doesn't cover the other guy above it. So now that we merged it, I can easily flip it so that I know if something is weird and I can change it. So for this guy, you know, it's fairly alright. I definitely need to kind of fix some of these areas, especially clean it up. So you'll notice that after using liner, you'll have these weird corners. It's very normal depending on how clean your line art is, and this is what I mean. It doesn't really matter if your line art is messy. If you're gonna do painting, you're gonna end up doing this anyways. So what we do is kind of just go ahead and clean up, oops, those rough edges like these, and make it nice and clean. Delete that. Oh gosh, there we go. Now lock that down, and I'm gonna go ahead and start kind of using the airbrush at first. Oh, I'm gonna use the airbrush at first to clean some of this up. Just make it nice and soft, but at the same time defined, because we need to make sure it's defined despite everything. And also it helps to blend things out, especially these tricky corners, with a very, very small airbrush. When the airbrush is smaller, it'll appear a lot sharper, and you can definitely use that to your advantage. Of course, using the lasso tool also helps with making sure that it's nice and sharp. Let me just go ahead and select the even darker color. There. And now back, actually no, not back. Let me use the smudge tool to just blend this area up. Of course, making sure to blend it enough so the line art, mostly the line art, would disappear a fair amount, because we don't want to keep the line art too much. Sometimes it can look a little messy. So that's what we're gonna do, is just kind of refine it so that you can hardly see the line art. There you go. And this side too. There we go. Probably gonna put a bit of shadow on the top of the head like that. And maybe do some half-hearted nose shadow there. Let me just put some half-hearted basic landmarks for faces. Yeah, it's pretty half-hearted. Okay, so now can do the same for here. Just kind of blur that, blend that in with the airbrush. And just very subtle like that. Okay, and you can also kind of clean some of this area up, maybe reduce the butt size. Might be a bit too crazy. Okay, I think that should be fine. And I want to indicate a bit of muscle, so I'm taking a darker color and a lighter color to form the buttocks. Like that. Okay. And of course, the neck area, using the lasso tool to select the clavicle and just subtly indicate the indent, and also the tendon as well, so that it looks nice and soft, but at the same time it's very defined. Also for the Adam's apple here too. There we go. Just a little bit more soft. Okay, should clean this up too, and the curve of the neck. Okay, delete. Oh god, I deleted the whole thing. Okay. Let me select that again. There we go. Okay, here we have it. Alright, so now I'm gonna add just a teeny bit of detail, some vein detail, just to make it feel a bit more realistic, because realistically it's gonna happen. Just add some of that small detail here and there. Maybe it's a little bit too much. You can kind of blur that in a bit. I say a bit too much. And let's see where else. Oh yes, and here too. There's also like veins that happen around the V-cut of the guy and near the stomach area, like here. And of course, if it gets too crazy, just blend that in. And there we go. There we have it. Okay, so now that that's done, we can go ahead and work on this guy now. This guy is a bit more buff. And let me just clean up this area here. Very, very messy. Just kind of select the jaggedy bits here. To delete. So now it's a bit more smoother. And you can also kind of maybe this part needs a bit more volume. Bulge up the areas where you feel like is needed. This area too needs a bit more. There we go. Here too. Of course, after you're done with that, you can also put a bit of that vein detail, especially alongside the arm here. Usually there's this really big vein here, and then also around the arm area here. Same thing with the other side. That's usually just where, when I observe photos of like really buff guys, they usually have veins in those areas. And then of course, if it's too much, just blur that. So now I'm gonna try to blur out all the line art from here. Okay. Also at the same time, gotta add a bit more shadow, so one more shade darker, especially near the chest area and the arm area where it's the tightest. Okay, now that that's done, okie dokie. Oh yes, and also this area needs to be pretty tight. There we go. And this side too. There we go. Okay. That should do it. Oh, also vein detail right here. And here. And a little here. Oh gosh. Just a little bit everywhere. Sometimes it gets to look not that good, so we're gonna blend that in. If it gets too crazy, pretty good technique is just blend it in a bit more or reduce the opacity of it by blending it in, or if you have it on a separate layer, you can also do that. Okay, so now it's starting to look a little better. Soften, oh, I forgot to lock it down. Soften this up. There we go. I'm also gonna add a bit of blue to this, just so, especially on dark skin character, blue looks really good. If the character is in, like, surrounded by a blue light, just kind of apply that. And of course, more blue here. And on the side too. Maybe a bit lighter. Just on the outside to give it that nice subtle blend into the environment type deal. So around the character, and maybe a little bit inside the shadow as well, but not too much. A little bit over here, not that much, just a teeny bit. Can do a little bit of it. Oh god, that's too very, very small amount. That's too much. Like that. So that helps kind of blend it into the background a bit more. Now that we've added the bluish tint to this one, let's do it for the other ones too. Also on the side note, I just noticed how low his belly button was. So we're gonna have to end up hiring a bit. So I'm just gonna select this whole area, Control C to copy, Control Shift V to paste in place, and Control T to prompt up the free transformation, warp that, and I'm gonna just like bring it up a bit. Now that I brought it up, as you can see, at least for me, I think it's looking a little better. Maybe just like around a bit, kind of like that. Once you're happy, merge that down, and then let's just like lock in the layer and start putting a bit of that nice blue around the character, especially around the shadow areas, the areas with shadow, which will drastically help with kind of making it feel a little bit better, a little bit more balanced. A little here, and on the side here too. It's more or less in the areas with the most shadow. There we go. So that's what we have. And then for this guy, let's start off by kind of blending it a bit more. And of course, we'll be cleaning it up slightly as well. But first, blending it. Go, and after we've done that, we can kind of add a bit more refinement to some of these areas. Like that. And of course, add the veins on the side to help with making it look a little bit more realistic. This here too. Like that. And here the V-cut. And on that one too. So now I'm going to use a lasso tool to help refine this area a bit better. Just clean that up. And also here too. Probably putting the nipples after because I kind of just erased it. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over here and try to blur out the lines. You can also kind of start to elaborate the belly button a bit more as well. make the V-cut on this side a bit more pronounced too. Okay. And let's see what else. Oh yes, remove the line here and on this side too. So in general, just cleaning up some of the mess to make it look a little nicer. Just close that for a bit. And then I'm going to add a bit of pink yellowness actually. This color down here. Just as a shadow softener or shadow, yeah, to kind of balance out the shadow a little bit, to make it not as visible, to make it a bit more soft. And of course, let me just darken this area up for the sake of shadow. Like that. Okie dokie, once that's done, I'm gonna work on the nipples. Although, usually don't really pay too much attention to the guy nipples. That should be fine. Oh yes, and this one too. There we go. Okay, and of course, we could probably add some interest such as scars, just to make it look a little rougher. Like these. Maybe add some more blush on the chest area, like that. And this side too. And maybe very soft shadow on the ab side. Last but not least, gonna select this area here because I want to put like some really intense shadow here, like that. Okay, that should do it. Alright, it's getting there. And of course over here too, gotta have some intense shadow, just very subtly, like that. Alright, so we're good to go for all of these. Just gonna do auto contrast, see how that does. Okay, that's a bit too much. I'm gonna remove some of that and gonna duplicate it, constrain it down, unlock, go to filter, blur it, and we're gonna turn the opacity down, go to soft light, turn the saturation down. So this allows us to kind of intensify the, okay, maybe this one's too much, so have to go here especially and make sure this one's much brighter. There we go. So this is before, after, just adds a little bit of intensity to the whole piece. And there you guys have it. The male dynamic torso, even though it's pretty much the whole body. But anyways, I hope you guys learned something. I'm gonna do a separate version for the not safe for work area. So this is the safe for work area, and I'll be doing two separate ones for both male and female shortly. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy that. Oh gosh, I might actually go back to add some more detail later on. Just want to add a bit of a blue in between the crotch. Yes, that is very important. There we go. Oh yeah, I forgot to add it here too. Totally forgot. adds a bit of blue here, and especially in the shadow part. And here too. There we go, nice and soft feeling. I added a bit on the chest area just to kind of pop that out from the shadow. Might have to edit that, clean this up a little. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Finally got to do this, and I will see you guys in the next voiceover tutorial, which is very shortly. I will be doing the not safe for work variation for these. See you guys soon.